CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jamie Owen.
And I'm Robin Dwyer. Our top stories. England's hospitals add more bed capacity, with COVID admissions expected to surge after the holiday.
Our other headlines: China is now the EU's biggest trading partner. Its foreign minister reflects on a challenging year in the relationship with the European Union.
Germany's big switch off. 3 more reactors shut down on the country's road to nuclear-free power.
And guilty of sex trafficking, Ghislaine Maxwell faces life behind bars, but her lawyers say she'll appeal. We're live in New York.
Hospitals across England are adding extra bed capacity to cope with an expected rise in admissions from the Omicron COVID variant.
8 new facilities, known as Nightingale units, will each have space for 100 patients, with a number of other sites also being considered.
It comes amid reports of further shortages of COVID tests in many parts of the UK. Let's talk now to our correspondent, Naweed Jabakal, who's outside a testing centre in London. So, Naweed, how bad are these COVID test shortages?
Well, Robin, I spoke to one of the workers here above my shoulder in the last few moments, and he says walk-in appointments are being taken now. So it looks like things are easing a bit here in this part of London, at least. But earlier today, that was a very different story. This morning, I went on the government website, and it said there was no availability for PCR tests anywhere in England, all across the country. Other parts of the United Kingdom, Wales and Northern Ireland did have availability. You can't access the Scottish government's website from here in the UK. They have their own separate testing regime. In terms of the PCR tests, people coming to testing centres like this, but it's not just a shortage and issues there, but with lateral flow tests as well. They are easier to take. People can take them at home, but they're thought to be less reliable. Many pharmacies across the UK, you can go and collect them from there, but there's been a widespread shortage across the country in terms of getting your hands on some of those. The government facing pressure to try and offer more, particularly with New Year's Eve around the corner, facing pressure because the government's own rules here in England say there are no more restrictions set to come in before the new year. So people are allowed, according to Boris Johnson in his latest update on Wednesday, he said people can celebrate the new year, be cautious. He said take a test, he said, which many people won't be able to do. So the government trying to roll out more of these lateral flow test kits. It says it's going to get 8 million of them distributed to pharmacies across the UK to try and stop the shortage. And moving forward with contingency plans in January and February, it's going to triple the amount of lateral flow tests it provides. It says that it's ordered 300 million a month. That's 3 times more than what it was ordering pre-Omicron. So clearly this new variant, even though it's proving, according to early studies, less likely to cause hospitalisation and death, it's still causing governments to react and now trying to ramp up its supplies moving forward to stop the effect of Omicron well into 2022.
And Naweed, what about this extra hospital bed capacity being set up, the so-called Nightingale units?
Yeah, well, rise in case numbers here is really one of the main reasons behind that. On Wednesday, the latest 24-hour period for which we have figures, 183,000 cases were reported. That's by some distance the biggest record, but it follows successive days of rising numbers and rising records. It must be said that data included a lag of about 5 days from Northern Ireland's data over the Christmas and Boxing Day period, which was why it was so high. But either way, these are still record numbers. Just having a look at the government website, it says that its latest data, because of deaths data in England, that will be delayed for a few hours. They usually come out around this time of the day, but they will have to wait a few more hours for that. In terms of what the Nightingale hospital units will be, it's not going to be like the previous Nightingale hospitals, which were set up towards the end of last year and the start of this year, when the UK was dealing with a huge peak in viruses, in cases as a result of the virus, particularly with hospitalisations and deaths much higher than they are now. this is going to be more dedicated units in hospitals that are already in place, and there'll be 8 of them starting with building work starting this week, according to the NHS. 100 patients at each one of those, 800 to start off with the capacity, the potential to add up to 4,000. Now, the issue the government faces with this is, on the one hand, they're telling people that they can celebrate in their New Year's. There's no need for tighter restrictions to come in. On the other hand, these measures are being taken to try and deal with what is clearly the seriousness of the virus and its impact. The National Medical Director of the NHS, Stephen Powis, said that it's now on a, quote, war footing to try and deal with what's happening with Omicron, because it's not just the people coming in now for the first time since March. More than 10,000 patients are in hospitals in England alone with coronavirus, but it's also about staff shortages. If people are testing positive or if they're having to self-isolate, that's going to cause a staff shortage on the front line with doctors and nurses. So the issue there seems fairly precarious, but as things stand, the UK says that cases are rising. People need to be cautious, but they can go ahead with their New Year's Eve celebration. But the idea is to try and get tested if you can get your hands on them.
Nui Jabakil, thanks very much.
Well, that's the situation in the UK. Meanwhile, Belgium has reopened theatres, cinemas and concert halls just a week after ordering them to close. There'd been widespread anger over the shutdown, with protests calling for fairer treatment of the cultural sector. Let's talk to our correspondent Benji Hire in Brussels. Benji, why the U-turn?
Well, partly because of that backlash that you were talking about just before. There was a theatre technician who thought that it wasn't justified, the government decision to shut cultural sectors to try to stop the spread of this new variant of coronavirus, Omicron. And so he took this to Belgium's highest court, who ruled in his favour, that said actually this was not a justified decision, and therefore the government has been forced into backtracking on that announcement, and just days after deciding to shut cinemas, theatres, other music venues, they're now, as of today, reopened, and we've seen people going in to watch movies, for example, in the cinema behind us, and that is all because of the intense frustration amongst the industry when that announcement was imposed a couple of days ago, taking to the streets, musicians, performers saying that the show must go on, and that if Christmas markets are allowed to continue and bars are allowed to open, then why shouldn't the cultural industry also benefit over this festive period? What's interesting to note that in Belgium, despite these restrictions, despite other measures still being in place, we're seeing cases still decrease overall, despite the fact that the pace at which those cases are decreasing is now starting to slow down.
Nui Jabakil was just filling us in on the COVID situation in the UK. More widely, how are things across Europe?
Well, it's a similar picture to what Naweed was talking about, essentially, because even though the new variant of coronavirus is deemed to be a lesser serious strain compared to previous ones, less hospitalisation, less deaths on average, still precautions being put in place because of the intense surge of infections that we're seeing across much of the continent. France sort of leading the way when it comes to setting records of daily cases, but other nations also feeling the strain. Italy and Spain amongst those, but on the other hand, they're trying to consider how to not get into a situation, I should say, where the economy is being really hit by this. Obviously, over the past 2 years of this pandemic, financial systems have been feeling the brunt of the COVID-19, and Italy and Spain are reducing their quarantine requirements to get people back to work so that industries such as hospitality aren't being hit by staff being absent. And again, the message being put to the people is to get vaccinated. It's a year to the day since people here in Belgium were eligible to get their vaccines initially, if they were elderly or if they were most vulnerable. And even a year on, 365 days later, that is still the message from the government, at least here, to ensure that people, if they're not vaccinated already, to get their first 2 shots and then booster vaccinations to ensure that this festive period doesn't lead to a massive surge in cases and potentially then hospitalisations and deaths as well.
Benji Hire, our correspondent in Brussels, thank you very much.
The World Health Organization is warning that the combination of Delta and Omicron variants is driving a dangerous tsunami of coronavirus. But how worried should we be? Dr. Amelia Skirmont is an evolutionary virologist at the University of Oxford.
It is dangerous because the number of infections is rising. So we will see more people in hospitals. But with Omicron and Delta at the moment, we will see the mixture. We still don't know. We still are not really sure if the Omicron cases are less severe. They might be, and the preliminary data points to that direction. So if the Omicron is also more transmissible than Delta, we will see more cases of Omicron with time and less of Delta, which also might be shown in hospital cases, so less hospitalizations. But if we will see more and more cases, we will see also more and more hospitalizations, and that's the threat.
Well, as you say, data suggesting that Omicron may be more mild. What are the implications of that? Does it mean that restrictions now in place are perhaps stronger than they might be?
Not really, because again, we see a number of cases rising, and it's still preliminary data, so we cannot say for sure if it's less severe. And also Delta is still around, and we know that infection with Delta can be severe and is more severe than with some other variants, for example, with the first variant. So we still need to keep these restrictions in place until we know more.
Viruses, of course, do mutate. Omicron won't be the last variant, will it?
No, because with each infection, there is a chance that the new variant will arise. And we need to remember that viruses mutate, that's normal. Viruses change, and they change upon infection. So each infection can just be the case when we will see the new variants. That happened with all the variants we've seen so far. And it can go both ways. It can start getting milder because the new variant will be, for example, even more transmissible, but will cause less severe disease, like hopefully we see with Omicron. But it can also happen that the more transmissible variant will be more severe. And that is something which we need to look out for. And that's why we still have restrictions. More infections means a higher chance of new variant appearing.
Shares in China's debt-ridden Evergrande Group have fallen by almost 10%. It comes after the real estate developer, which has almost $300 billion in liabilities, failed to pay offshore coupons due earlier this week. The drop wipes out recent gains, which came after the firm resumed construction work. There are fears there could be further defaults in the new year.
Shares in China's biggest artificial intelligence company, SenseTime, jumped 23% on the first day of trading. SenseTime had been forced to postpone its public offering by almost 3 weeks after the United States put it on a blacklist. The company raised $740 million in Hong Kong trading. That's the biggest first-day gain for any company in the past 6 months.
It was an unexpected Christmas present. The Spanish bank Santander is trying to claw back over $175 million from its customers after a Christmas Day blunder. The cash was mistakenly deposited in 75,000 accounts after people were paid twice from their company payrolls. The bank has apologized and admits retrieving the cash could push some into overdraft if the money has been spent.
And the United States trade deficit in goods widened to a record $97.8 billion in November. That's more than 17% higher than the previous month. Imports rose almost 5%, while exports were down by around 2%. The gap largely reflects the faster improvement in the US economy compared with most other countries.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, trade between China and the EU is increasing, but China's foreign minister says it's been a challenging year for the relationship.
Search CGTN Europe wherever you get your podcasts to subscribe to the Agenda podcast. The Agenda with me, Stephen Cole, always gets to the heart of the story. Just subscribe today and listen now.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more...
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us, excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Facing the unknown is always difficult. In a world in turmoil, it's easy to lose orientation. But when the storms come, we have to see the possibilities. Reinvent. Find new opportunities. Discover a path forward. CGTN. See the difference.
The world has changed under the pressure of the pandemic. For many of us, life is returning to some kind of normal. As we're adapting to changes in all of our lives, let Global Business Europe be your guide to the new normal. Join us weekdays on CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. Just a reminder that CGTN is available to watch for free on all the major digital platforms, on Smart TV or online on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube and Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app, and in the UK on Freeview.
China's foreign minister has talked of a cognitive split in the European Union's policies on China. Wang Yi says trade with Europe is increasing, but so too the arguments over human rights in Hong Kong, Uyghurs and Taiwan. He's been talking to CGTN anchor Lu Xin.
The EU describes China as a partner, but also as a systemic rival. And the ratification of the China-EU Comprehensive Investment Treaty has met difficulties because of internal problems within the EU. Where do you see Sino-European relations going next? And what will China do to promote, to push for the ratification of the investment treaty?
This year, new progress has been made in many areas in the relations between China and Europe. President Xi Jinping has chaired 2 video summits with French and German leaders. The China CEEC summit has been held successfully via video link. Premier Li Keqiang also engaged extensively with European leaders and business community. Economic and trade cooperation between the two sides has enjoyed positive growth despite overall difficulties, with trade volume for the whole year expected to increase by 30% from last year to exceed US $800 billion. The China-EU agreement on geographical indications has come into force. High-level dialogues on the environment and climate in the digital field have been officially launched. The number of freight services of the China-Europe Railway Express recorded a new high. Progress has been made in flagship Belt and Road projects such as the Paracas Port and the Budapest-Belgrade Railway. The two sides share extensive consensus on such issues as upholding multilateralism and enhancing global governance, and have achieved positive outcomes in tackling climate change and jointly responding to COVID-19. That said, we have also noticed that Europe's policy towards China seems to suffer from cognitive dissonance. It is hard to imagine that on one hand, Europe seeks to build a comprehensive strategic partnership with China, and on the other hand, it defines China as a systemic rival. This logic has not only undermined China-Europe relations, but also brought confusion to European friends themselves. Difference in systems does not mean China and Europe have to be rivals. The two sides could well respect each other, learn from each other, and complement each other. In this context, we stand ready to have closer engagement and communication and earnestly enhance mutual understanding between China and Europe, including open, candid dialogue on such topics as human rights and democracy. Moreover, we hope that Europe, as an important force in the process toward greater multipolarity, will shape an independent, objective, and rational perception of China at an early date, and promote and deepen its mutually beneficial cooperation with China following the principle of strategic autonomy. If China and Europe, as two great civilizations, major forces and big markets, can draw on each other's strength and forge synergy on the basis of mutual respect, this will augur well for the world and humanity. On the China-EU Comprehensive Agreement on Investment, it is an economic and trade agreement with the highest level of opening up and lowest market access threshold to date for China. It is good for China and even better for Europe. Obstacles to the agreement are obstacles to one's own development and will hurt the long-term interests of the European people.
Ghislaine Maxwell's lawyers say she'll appeal after she was found guilty of sex trafficking charges. The British socialite's facing the rest of her life behind bars after a New York jury ruled that she recruited and groomed underage girls to be abused by her former partner, Jeffrey Epstein. Let's talk now to our correspondent, John Terrett in New York. Hello to you, John. So, a sensational trial, a high-profile trial. What happened in the courtroom when the verdict was read out?
Yes, it was sensational. It was high profile. It lasted around about a month, and the verdict came down about 18 hours ago. And Ghislaine Maxwell was stoic. There was almost no reaction whatsoever. She stared straight ahead, sipping at a glass of water. And that's not like her. During the course of the trial, she had engaged with people much more, with her lawyers. She'd look people in the eye, all that sort of thing. This was a landmark verdict for this kind of a case. You have to remember, this is one of the highest profile convictions of a female in a sex trafficking ring involving underage girls that the world has ever seen. Normally women are not accused of this sort of thing, let alone convicted. But Ghislaine Maxwell has been convicted on 5 out of 6 counts, including trafficking a minor, which was the most serious of them. The jury deliberated for a full 5 days, and in that time they asked plenty of advice of the judge and asked to see multiple documents, including 5 that they asked to see just a few hours before they came to a decision. Now, Maxwell's legal team is convinced that she is innocent and that she will lodge an appeal early in the new year. They feel convinced that they will be successful with that. At the moment, there is no date set for any sentencing of Ghislaine Maxwell. She turned 60 on Christmas Day here in her holding cell in Lower Manhattan, and she's now facing 65 years in jail. One key moment in the trial, the judge asking Ghislaine Maxwell, do you want to testify in your own defence? And Ghislaine Maxwell, instead of just saying yes or no, stood up and said, Your Honour, the government has failed to prove the case against me. There's no need for me to testify. Well, clearly, Robin and Jamie, the jury, felt otherwise. Guys?
So, John, what does this mean for others implicated?
Well, there are many people, of course, who are implicated. Over 100 women have come forward, although this case here centred only on 4 of them. The thing is that Ghislaine Maxwell was a socialite, known very well in very well-to-do circles in Europe and in the United States, with very high-profile friends, along with her friend and lover, Jeffrey Epstein. They knew people like Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, several senators from Washington, D.C., and, of course, I think at this moment, most high profile of all, Prince Andrew, who is a very senior member of the British royal family. Now, it's important to point out that in this criminal case, none of these men were accused of anything. They were not on trial. Ghislaine Maxwell was on trial for what she did, and that's what the case centred on. But nonetheless, I think it has to be said that the heat is turned up a little bit on Prince Andrew now because of the verdict and the size of the verdict. And I think that there are 2 key reasons for that, if I may say. One is that there is a civil case against Prince Andrew, which I'll get to in just a second. But the other thing is, it is thought that Ghislaine Maxwell might talk much more now that she has been convicted than she has done up till now. There are so many unanswered questions in this case, so very, very many. But she clearly knows stuff, and the question is, will she now talk about that in return for a lighter sentence? We'll have to see. Finally, regarding that civil case against Prince Andrew, it involves Virginia Giuffre, whose name came up an awful lot in this criminal case, but who did not appear here. And she certainly was not a witness. I think that they felt that they didn't actually need her, given the 4 that they did have. She is bringing the civil case against Prince Andrew, and his lawyers are flying to America to try and get it stopped, because they say that she is not an American citizen as she claims to be. She was born in America, but they say that's now changed, and she doesn't live in New York where the case would happen, and therefore the case can't go ahead. They're going to try and stop it on those grounds. The case is on the docket for September of next year, so it could be an uncomfortable 9 months for Prince Andrew. Guys?
John Terretts, thank you very much.
South Korea's former president, Park Geun-hye, has been released from prison after being given a presidential pardon. She was serving a 22-year sentence for corruption, charges which saw her removed from office in 2017. She's now being treated in hospital. Our correspondent Jack Barton reports.
South Korea's former president, Park Geun-hye, who was impeached, arrested and sentenced to 22 years in prison, was technically set free at the stroke of midnight, though in reality she remains in her bed at Seoul's Samsung Hospital. You can see behind me, her prison guards walked away, security personnel stepped in. Park Geun-hye was at the centre of the biggest corruption scandal this country has ever seen, with her friend charged with taking millions of dollars in bribes and gifts from some of the biggest corporate figures here in return for getting influence from the president, including a merger between 2 big Samsung units so that then acting head of Samsung, Lee Jae-myung, could rise to the top of the conglomerate. He too spent time in prison for his part in that scandal. There are questions about what impact this release will have coming just ahead of the March presidential election. There's no doubt the ruling party will hope that she stays true to the pledge she made on hearing that she was to be pardoned, which is she would focus on her health, spend a few more months in hospital and stay out of the spotlight. Her own supporters perhaps hoping she will do the same thing, given the man that now heads the opposition party was actually the prosecutor at the time of her impeachment, the man who impeached former President Park Geun-hye. If she doesn't remain in the spotlight, she is a very divisive figure. Even though President Moon Jae-in in the pardon said he was doing it for the sake of national unity, something that has caused quite a bit of controversy here, and even supporters of President Moon and his party coming out for a counter-demonstration today in Seoul city centre protesting against this release. Jack Barton, CGTN, Seoul.
3 nuclear power plants are being shut down in Germany, a part of a move to end the country's reliance on atomic energy.
The policy decision was made a decade ago in response to the Fukushima nuclear disaster in Japan. Our correspondent Trent Murray reports.
Well, it was back in 2011 that former Chancellor Angela Merkel first promised to phase out nuclear power. Her pledge had come within weeks of Japan's Fukushima nuclear disaster, an event which not only shocked many people here in Germany, but also created political pressure for Merkel. Herself, a trained quantum chemist, could now see that many in Germany were worried about the perceived risks associated with the nuclear industry. That makes the shutdown of these 3 nuclear reactors a significant moment. Merkel's original promise was for Germany to phase out nuclear power by 2022. And with the closure of the 3 plants in Schleswig-Holstein, Lower Saxony and Bavaria, that keeps that timeline on track. It leaves Europe's biggest economy with just 3 reactors remaining, but they too are now on borrowed time, with the Environment Ministry pledging to power them all down by the end of 2022 at the latest. Now, nuclear accounts for about 10% of Germany's electricity production, and the shutdown has prompted some uncomfortable questions about how the void will be filled. But the new government, led by Chancellor Olaf Scholz, has set a goal of generating about 80% of the country's electricity from renewable sources like wind and solar by the year 2030. Energy policy is always highly political in Germany, not just because of how important tackling climate change is to vast swathes of the population, but also because in many ways it underpins the country's complicated relationship with Russia. About 40% of Germany's natural gas imports come from Russia, and with gas prices rising right as winter sets in, President Vladimir Putin has promised to come to the rescue, saying the Kremlin-backed Nord Stream 2 pipeline has now been filled with gas and is ready to go, pending the final regulatory approvals from authorities here in Berlin. Trent Murray, CGTN, Berlin.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, the UK's economy bounced back strongly this year, but will this robust performance continue into 2022?
It is now important that all of us in Europe act very swiftly.
Fines for the non-vaccinated will most likely be between $1,000 and $4,000.
The new Omicron variant circulating in southern Africa.
The financial markets have also reacted badly to the news.
Growing dissatisfaction with the way the Dutch government is handling the pandemic.
Cancelling the city's main public Christmas markets for the second year in a row.
Protests and riots by those opposed to restrictions and vaccinations.
There is no room for complacency in this ongoing battle against COVID.
On the agenda with me, Stephen Cole, we look up into space. We look down into data. We look at debt. We look at politics. We look at opioids, climate change. We look at all the issues that really matter around the world. But you matter too. We want to tell the stories you want to see and hear about. Make it your agenda.
The agreement is signed. But what is the real deal now the UK has left the EU? For trade, for business, for the city, for ordinary people. Make sense of Brexit with CGTN.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Robin Dwyer. Our top stories. England's hospitals are to get more bed capacity, with COVID admissions expected to surge after the holidays.
Our other headlines: Germany shuts down 3 more reactors as it heads towards nuclear-free power.
And the UK socialite Ghislaine Maxwell is facing life behind bars after being found guilty of sex trafficking. Her lawyers say she'll appeal.
The presidents of Russia and the United States will speak by phone later, their second call this month. The talks are aimed at reducing tension on the border between Russia and Ukraine, where some 120,000 Russian troops are thought to have massed. Russia says the deployment is in response to increased NATO activity along its borders.
South Africans have been paying their respects to the late Archbishop Desmond Tutu as his body lies in state in Cape Town. Mourners filed past the coffin at St George's Cathedral after it was blessed by a member of the clergy. His funeral will take place this weekend. The Nobel Prize winner who spearheaded the anti-apartheid movement died on Sunday at the age of 90.
Australia's former Parliament building in Canberra has been set on fire during a protest over Aboriginal rights. Demonstrations calling for sovereignty for Indigenous people have been going on for more than a week. The blaze was quickly put out and was condemned by the Prime Minister and a leading Aboriginal rights group.
Tech billionaire Elon Musk has rejected claims that his Starlink satellites are taking up too much room in space. China says its space station has had to take evasive action to avoid colliding with Musk's satellites, while the European Space Agency has accused Musk of making the rules for the commercial space industry. Speaking to the Financial Times, the Tesla boss described space as enormous and likened satellites to cars on Earth. As 2021 draws to a close, we've been speaking to our correspondents about the stories that left the biggest impression on them over the last 12 months.
CGTN's Giles Gibson reports on the European Union from Brussels, but he told me it was a human story, not a political one, that stayed in his mind.
Well, Jamie, the story that really connected with me in 2021 was the US when it reopened its borders to travellers from Europe and other parts of the world after months and months of restrictions. Families who'd been separated for such a long time had been campaigning under this hashtag, Love is Not Tourism. And when the travel restrictions were finally lifted in early November of 2021, I'm sure everybody saw those videos on social media of families and couples who'd been separated for so long, hugging and being reunited in airports and airport arrivals lounges all over the United States. This story really connected with me on a personal level because I sort of experienced it in reverse. Until the late summer of 2021, I was based in the US, in Washington, D.C., and just because it was really complicated getting back into the US as a foreign traveller, as a foreign citizen, I didn't see my family and my friends for well over a year. And unfortunately, with this new Omicron variant that's now emerging, it does seem that countries are starting to batten down the hatches again. So families could once again, into 2022, just start being separated once again by international borders and by this deadly virus.
Giles, let's look at the year to come. Brexit tussles, of course, still play on. Tensions within the EU. The steely and steady presence of German Chancellor Angela Merkel gone. What should we look out for in the new year, in 2022?
Well, I think we should be watching big picture, so to speak, in terms of the power brokers of the European Union perhaps changing. Germany and France are, of course, the two biggest economies in the bloc, and historically speaking, they've just enjoyed a lot of sway in terms of setting the policy direction for the European Union. As you mentioned, Angela Merkel, the German Chancellor, has stepped down after 16 years in office. She really helps the European Union to steer its way through some of its biggest ever challenges. I'm thinking of things like the Greek debt crisis as well as the migrant crisis in 2015. Olaf Scholz is now taking over as German Chancellor at the head of a new coalition in Germany. And meanwhile, in France, we have presidential elections coming up in April of 2022, and there is absolutely no guarantee that Emmanuel Macron will be elected for a second term as French president. So we could see, in the space of 6 months, the two leaders of the two biggest countries in Europe, those two power brokers that I was talking about, changing.
While the UK economy was one of the hardest hit among major economies in 2020, its economic recovery in 2021 was one of the most robust.
But there are concerns amongst investors that further price shocks and supply chain issues, not just from the pandemic, but also from Brexit, point to slower growth in the year ahead. Our correspondent Juliet Mann reports.
It's festive, it's inviting, it's that most wonderful time of the year. Or is it? With rising prices and higher bills to pay, we're all feeling the squeeze.
Oh, my budget's always stretched. Like,
food has gone up. Food and drink.
We're just wandering around here now, trying to work out what to eat. So,
and whether we can afford it. So this is so depressing.
Inflation was meant to be transitory, and in the end, it's looking like it's meant to stay. I think it's a bit scary, isn't it?
I think my main concern is how the Bank of England is going to, if they're going to increase rates into next year, and the impact it's going to have on people's livelihoods and their debts. I think that's my main concern, and if we have further restrictions on top of that, it's just going to make life so much harder
Life's already more expensive. Across the board, grocery prices are up 3.2%, which is the highest rate of inflation recorded since June 2020. Savoury snacks went up by 7.6%. Even the average cost of a Christmas meal is 3.5% more than last year. As for getting about, Uber fares are up 10%, and used cars are gaining value, while the global shortage of computer chips used in car production has led to fewer new vehicles being made. A 3-year-old Mini Hatch was 57% more in 2021 than a model of the same age in 2019.
We're seeing historical highs in so many commodities, and in part that's because of the kind of bottlenecks that have emerged around about the past year odd. And I think those bottlenecks are going to get cleared. I think the global supply chain is going to be able to get sorted out and return to some sort of semblance of normality. That should drive down commodity prices over the sort of medium term. And therefore that part of the inflation picture, I think, will be transitory, and hopefully businesses will be able to pass on that lower cost to consumers in time.
We now know the economy's recovered strongly from 2020 and continues to do so. But economic forecasters aren't entirely sure how long it can last. The buzzwords of the pandemic are still, after all, unprecedented uncertainty.
The mood at this market is jolly, and people have come out to spend their hard-earned cash. Their shopping bags are bulging, but they're worried about COVID, the impact that Omicron is going to have on travel plans, how new restrictions will hurt hospitality, all of which makes the prospects for UK economic growth look weaker.
Those same questions come around again about how the economy will cope without the life support of furlough, property tax breaks and business loans. There's a lot for policymakers to mull over. Without much needed support, households and businesses might not be merry and bright. And may all your Christmases be warm. Juliet Mann, CGTN, London.
And Juliet Mann has been speaking to the economist Vicky Price and asked her about the impact of Brexit 1 year on.
There have been all sorts of negotiations that have been taking place through the year, and still a number of things were not sorted out. And there is a likelihood that things will improve in the new year because, of course, there is a lot of concern about the impact that Brexit has had on trade. We've seen trade with the EU slow down quite significantly, while other types of trades have done well. And there needs to be some rapprochement, if you like. And it looks like, particularly if the economy suffers in any other way because of Omicron, that there will be an extra push, if you like, to ensure that relationships improve and that goods can move more easily. There's been a lot of concern from SMEs, in particular small and medium-sized companies, worrying about the extra bureaucracy. And of course, we've got to bear in mind that certainly up to now, the UK has hardly put any restrictions itself into any goods coming in from Europe. What's happening on staff shortages? This is, of course, an issue that has affected loads of countries because the way in which demand has expanded significantly during 2021 has meant that there were quite a lot of areas where labour couldn't respond. There weren't enough people around. We lost loads of people because of Brexit, but also it's because of where some of the extra demands were coming from. People were in the wrong place, in the wrong sectors. It takes time for that rearrangement to take place.
Rising inflation is something else that's made it a rather challenging end to 2021. That first interest rate hike in 3 years was fantastic news for lenders. Looking ahead, is it going to be fantastic news for the markets?
Well, interestingly enough, the markets didn't take too much fright from this. And if you look at what happened to the exchange rates, it sort of didn't really move up particularly. The markets are concerned about growth in the future. There's no doubt about that. And interest rate increases are not going to be particularly helpful from that point of view. But of course, inflation has gone up very significantly. It's gone up everywhere, but it's mostly fuel, energy costs going up some of the staff cost increases too have affected businesses, and they are trying to pass them on. Manufacturing output prices are going up as something like 10%. So something needs to give, and the likelihood is that we're going to see more interest rate increases through 2022.
And what does this mean in terms of the UK being attractive to business? Do you think London will still shine as a world-leading financial sector?
What we've seen is that, for the moment at any rate, there hasn't been a huge amount of displacement. So the number of jobs that were feared that would be lost because of Brexit haven't quite materialised. There's been a recent report that suggests that certainly in the financial sector side, organisations have been waiting for the impact of COVID to go, if you like, before they look again at what structures they want in the future. Obviously, if you can't move people around, you can't easily do anything really in terms of relocating practices, and that, I think, has taken a bit of a back sort of step for the moment. But there's always a concern that we are going to be losing businesses, and a number have relocated. And what happens next in terms of the relationships with Europe are going to be crucial, I think, in terms of securing the future of the city.
Well, in a year of lockdowns and gloom and doom around the pandemic, there have been some bright spots. Neil Cairns, editor of CGTN's Razor documentary show, told me about the scientific progress being made in areas like biodiversity and space exploration. But he started by reflecting on the challenges of reporting the pandemic.
It's been a struggle. It's been a battle trying to keep ahead of this virus in every way. And as science journalists, trying to report on it in a way that's keeping people informed, but also not going ahead. So much of the stuff that's been reported about this is been in non-peer-reviewed journals, and the news proper is often leaping ahead into that. And we're having to decide, well, is that a story we should be doing now? And then trying to do it, and in a couple of instances, covering stories, and then just because of the onslaught of this virus being, left behind and having to abandon them and, pick up the next threat.
What else caught your eye in 2021?
Well, of course, it's been a year of not just COVID, but climate change. And the one thing that I feel hopeful, I feel like we have finally reached a political and economic tipping point when it comes to climate change and biodiversity. People are no longer thinking about biodiversity as the need to protect our ecosystem as some, white tiger somewhere in a place where they'll never go. People are finally realising, both with climate change and with biodiversity protection, that we're talking about saving us. We're not talking about animals that we'll never see or ecosystems that we'll never see. We are part of this ecosystem, and if we let it collapse, we're going with it. And that, I think, has been is now understood, and I think we're on the road to progress. I'm really excited about the UN 30 by 30 initiative, where 30% of land and sea is going to be protected, or aims to be protected, by the year 2030. And I think we are actually at, as I said, an economic and political tipping point there. I think the momentum is good now.
Let's look ahead to this new year. It would be optimistic to assume that COVID is going to disappear, but that will probably figure in many of your stories in the coming year, and other things as well, obviously.
I'm afraid we're going to be covering COVID for a long time yet. I was thinking about this COVID thing and trying to think, and I started reading about the 1919 flu epidemic, because when flu first hit in 1918-19, when flu first hit, it was quite mild, but it wasn't until that autumn of 1980 that the second wave hit, a new variant that did different things to the lungs, and people were dying, in their droves. And so, this idea of variants isn't a new idea. We're going to be dealing with new variants all the time, and we're going to be asking ourselves always with our, biting our nails, is this one going to evade the vaccines? But I think there's also hope there that the amazing speed with which these vaccines were produced, nothing like it has ever happened in scientific endeavour before. And the whole scientific community coming together was just so incredible, to make this happen. And I think we will be able to have vaccines that will deal with the new variants as we come up.
Let's escape planet Earth for a moment and look at one of the other big stories that's likely to figure large in 2022.
The one thing that's really exciting me is the launch of the James Webb telescope. It's the most up-to-date the biggest mirror of any space telescope ever produced before. And it's not in low Earth orbit. It's 1.5 million kilometres away from Earth, in a point where the gravity is between the Earth, Moon and the Sun is stable, so it can sit rock solid. And I think it's going to be like Jodrell Bank and Hubble before it. The things we thought we're going to see are going to be much more than we actually do see. And its mission will change because it's going to bring us information we had no idea about. So I'm very excited about that.
And physically, where is this?
It's a point that sits towards the sun, away from us, and in the moon. And it's where the gravity of all of those things balance out so that it can sit stable. It's not being pulled by everything else. It's called a Lagrange point.
Just one final thought. COVID has inevitably pushed scientists and doctors around the world into the spotlight. It's been a terrible story in so many ways, but a wonderful story for the importance of science and scientists. Scientists are the new global superstars, and in perhaps a way they had been perhaps ignored a little before.
Yeah, no, we are. We now know the names of scientists that we didn't know before. Sarah Gilbert, nobody knew that. They would have known the names of footballers and movie stars. These people, as you say, they've become movie stars, and quite rightly. And, you know, as someone of my bent would say, they always should have been.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. Rio's New Year's party is on, but experts urge caution as COVID cases surge.
Together for a shared future, you and I, we can touch the sky. Together for a shared future, you and I, together, you and I.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe. Many of Brazil's cities have cancelled their end-of-year celebrations over growing concern about the Omicron variant. But Rio de Janeiro's famed New Year's Eve festivities will go ahead with scaled-back events.
The city's authorities have announced measures to try and avoid mass gatherings, but health experts are calling for caution. CGTN's Lucrecia Franco reports.
Despite the flight cancellations due to the COVID-19 Omicron variant, more than 200,000 tourists have managed to make it to Rio de Janeiro ahead of New Year's Eve. Foreigners and Brazilians who arrive from abroad, however, must present proof of vaccination and a negative test for COVID-19.
I think the most important thing is for all of us to be healthy and safe in the new year, regardless. In general, we love Brazil.
The city's hotels are fully booked. The situation is even looking better than the past 2 years after Brazil announced several COVID-19 preventive measures, according to Rio's Hotel Association.
Following these rules, we are going to be able to do an amazing event. Looking at last year, we had 41% occupancy. This year, the city will be over 100%.
City officials have imposed some restrictions for the event. No car or public transportation traffic will be allowed to reach the world-famous fireworks here on Copacabana Beach on December 31st, with other firework displays taking place in 9 other locations to avoid crowds. There will be no outdoor concerts this year, but the 16 minutes of spectacular pyrotechnics and music will take place. But while Rio's City Hall and the tourism sector seem to be embracing these special measures for ringing in 2022, health experts warn they will still not be strict enough to prevent the spread of the highly contagious Omicron variant. Dr. Margarete Dalcomo, one of Brazil's top scientists and a vaccine advocate, does not recommend any large gathering at this time.
it could be reasonable to have, I would say, small meetings, but not these big events, big gathering of people, even being outside. I think that there is a risk, and some authorities are saying that the risk is calculated, but it's not calculated when we are dealing with a new strain, which consequences we are not fully aware.
Rio de Janeiro has already lost nearly 70,000 lives to the virus, and nobody knows if this New Year's Eve party will trigger another wave of infections or fatalities. It seems likely the impact will depend on the decisions people make as they welcome in a better year. Lucrecia Franco, CGTN, Rio de Janeiro.
It's one of the most dramatic events at the Winter Olympics and potentially the most dangerous.
Ski jumping has long been a draw for spectators, offering spectacular daredevil action.
Caroline Malone has been watching the United States ski jump team as they prepare for Beijing 2022.
Ski jumping is reaching the height of its 2021 calendar in the United States, ahead of the Beijing Winter Olympics. Trials held in the former Olympic town of Lake Placid, New York, help decide which athletes get to go to the Games. Among them are men and women, boys and girls, some in their mid-teens, who are competing on the national stage for the first time. Most have been jumping since they were young children.
Well, you just start on the smaller hills and then you build up and you just learn to go fly all the way down the hill.
Judges are looking at the power, control and length of the jump. This ski jump is a K90, which means it's 90 meters from where the athletes take off to where the hill begins to flatten out. The best jumpers go up to 100 meters. There are different start positions at the top of the inlay, which dictates how fast each athlete goes. When you stand this close to the action, you can see how precise and powerful this Winter Olympic sport is. When the athletes jump from this point, they're going at their fastest speed. This one, more than 86 kilometers per hour. The coaches say ski jumpers are usually strong, slim and flexible. But strength of mind is even more important.
Ski jumping is probably 80% mental. You can go and you can train and do all these things off the hill in the weight room in the gym and do technique sessions, but if you don't have confidence in yourself, it's not going to come together.
Youth sometimes helps too. Coaches say the younger jumpers often have less fear. But 15 years old is the minimum age at which they're allowed to compete at the international level. For ski jumpers, there's nothing like the feeling of the sport.
It's kind of undescribable. You just it just feels like you're floating almost. Yeah.
Just watching ski jumping up this close most definitely takes your breath away. Caroline Malone, CGTN, Lake Placid, New York.
Well, Christmas may have gone, but it's not too late for a festive treat, at least for elephants at Berlin Zoo, who've been given some prickly leftovers to munch on. Eating Christmas trees might not sound that appetising, but zookeepers say they're like chocolate for the elephants, with the spiky needles tickling their tongues and the taste of resin melting in their mouth. The surplus trees have been donated by suppliers and are also enjoyed by bison, goats and reindeer.
The headlines again. England's hospitals add more bed capacity, with COVID admissions expected to surge after the holidays.
Germany's big switch off. 3 more reactors have been shut down on the country's road to nuclear-free power.
And China's foreign minister says it's been a difficult year for relations with the EU, despite trade reaching new highs.
That's it for Global Business Europe. Thanks for watching.
Coming up next on CGTN, it's Africa Live. We'll see you again tomorrow, same time, same place. From all of the team in London, it's goodbye.
Goodbye.